Hello and welcome to episode 26 of Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. My guest today is Benjamin Grant Ferguson. Ben is the host on WREC 600 AM every day from Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 in the morning, then again 5 to 6 in the afternoon of the Ben Ferguson Show. He is also a host of the Ben Ferguson podcast. And every Sunday night from 6 to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, he hosts a nationally syndicated show that goes out to over 100 stations nationwide. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to hang out with a friend.
Awesome. So tell us something interesting about yourself that most people don't know.
That's a great question. This is fun to actually not talk politics, first off. I will say this. A lot of people don't realize how much time I take away from politics. And just got back from Pinehurst, where my son, who just turned 6, got in the World Golf Championships, came in 17th in the world. Awesome. And that was something that is definitely outside the realm. It was, to be a dad of 3 boys. I've got twin boys that are 3 years old. I've got a new 6-year-old, as I say, just had his birthday last week. That's really my focus. And what I do, pretty much everything I do now just is for them. And to get to spend quality time with them. So if, a lot of people don't realize I don't talk that much about my family on the air. And really it's because, unfortunately, of the political environment. You have too many people that come after you. They want to come after your kids. They want to attack your family. And so to be able to take a step back and just enjoy that moment with him and to be able to caddy for him. And to watch him succeed at something, it was like full circle, looking back at my career and what my parents did for me as well.
You were homeschooled by your mom, I believe, through the 10th grade. What was that like?
It gave a lot of time for me to develop other things. I played tennis in college, started tennis late, so having the ability to kind of catch up. Anyone that played with me knew I worked my tail off, but I started late. I was a late bloomer. We were never a member of a country club, right? And that's a big disadvantage. I ended up cutting grass for my coach so that he would teach me and stringing his tennis rackets for him and did an amazing job helping me get a college scholarship, which was ultimately the goal. And so for my experience, it was really nice, being able to get into radio in Memphis when I was 12 and do it. I could have done that if I wasn't homeschooled. But there's also the negative side of it. And I tell parents all the time that think, if you homeschool your kid, you're going to be able to create this prodigy and whatever they're good at. That's not the reason to do it. My parents homeschooled me for none of those reasons. It was because we were in a failing school district. Where I grew up was a failing school district. And the option of private school wasn't an option for my family financially at the time. And so that was the only option. That was the alternative. And, I went to Westminster Academy at part-time in the 10th grade and 11th grade, 12th grade. And that was also a blast because I got to play sports on a team, got to play basketball, got to make friends, feel kind of just normal, if that makes sense. Yeah. And just have a normal life and not just be at home, studying and then going to the tennis courts or going to the radio studio.
What was your childhood like when you were a little kid?
A lot of fun. My dad was in law enforcement right here in Memphis area. And so I remember jumping in and he had one of those Dodge. It was like the equivalent of it was a Dodge Charger. It looked like the big box in 1980s, early 90s, OJ, basically Bronco. And so I used to go with him on calls when I was younger, which was a lot of fun. And just getting to spend time with him. My dad he's a great dad. He just spent time with my twins, taking care of them while we took my son to Pinehurst. And he was a quality time dad. And I think he would even say this, like he didn't have all the toys, right? He didn't have the lake house at Pickwick. He didn't have the country club membership, but he made memories by spending quality time with me and my sister. And if there's anything I took from my childhood, it was kids, you can buy them stuff, you can sign them up for stuff, you can throw them in stuff, but nothing is going to take the place, I think, of quality time of those moments you have with your kids. And so even with my career, I've done everything I can to spend as much quality time with my boys as possible and help them grow and nurture their dreams and their aspirations. And even like my son, I mean, coming in 17th in the world was the most stressful thing I think I've ever done. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat for 3 days. I mean, I laughed because I told my wife, I was like, I have never like lived or died with a shot like your son, but it's not because you want to win. It's just, you want them to do well.
Right.
And I mean, literally, she's like, are you going to be okay? And I was like, my stomach is churning. I'm exhausted. I'm not sleeping. And once it was over, right? It was done. The last ball was hit and we held hands walking down the fairway. But I think, you know, just you want your kid to do well in life and you want them to be happy and you want them to be successful. And that was something that my parents, it was part of their dream, was just to at least give me the opportunities they could. And I think that's probably the best part about my childhood.
I bet every shot that Bradley took in that tournament, you were taking that shot with him, weren't you?
100%. I mean, I've had a lot of really cool opportunities, whether it's being on the stage with President Bush, you know, interviewing Donald Trump, speaking at the biggest conventions. Just recently, I was over in Hungary, in Budapest, with the prime minister there on his balcony. And it's one of those pinch you moments where you're sitting there with a world leader. You're talking about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia and energy independence. And it's a moment. It's a moment in your career that you know, you think, wow, am I really doing this? And he's asking you advice about this and foreign policy and diplomacy and explaining to you Zelensky and dependence on foreign oil from Russia and the pipelines and being landlocked. And those are moments, but I don't get nervous in those moments. I just look at them as kind of an opportunity and an exciting point of all the hard work. But when you're watching your kid, I mean, dude, I told my wife, I was like, I am mentally and physically exhausted after these 3 days of doing this. We were walking down the first fairway and there was another kid that, you know, who was from Australia. And I looked at his dad and the other dad was from China, because it was 54 nations, 110 kids from all over the world that qualified to get in. And I looked at the one dad from Australia and I was like, are you feel like you're about to have a heart attack? And he walked over, he goes, dude, thank you so much for saying that. He was like, didn't sleep but like 30 minutes last night. So it was fun to see other dads like experiencing that moment of like, you know, I'm not the only one.
You know, you were the youngest on-air host in history of the radio talk show industry. At the young age of, 12, 13 years old, you started off, you had 30 minutes on the radio 1 day a week, and then it grew to 5 days a week while you were in high school. How did a teenager handle school, work, tennis, and a social life too?
It was always a struggle. I don't think you can do anything that well without something else suffering, whether that's just spending time in the books. I was a realist. I knew that tennis was going to pay for college, so that was a priority. And I even looked at my teachers. I'm like, look, I'm not an A student. I don't have time to be an A student. I'm going for a B. When I went to college, it was the same thing. I was trying to have a 3.0. I knew that I couldn't keep my college scholarship and try to play tennis and spend that time. So there's a give and take. Some people have that where they can make straight A's and do something else at an elite level. I had to work at school. And so for me, I think setting realistic expectations and not being a perfectionist, anyone that knows me, I'm just not. I'm competitive, Michael, for sure. And, I compete with my good friends every day in podcasting. You get instant ratings every day. You know how many downloads you get every day. You know where you are on the Apple charts or on the Chartable charts. Like, all of these things. And I'm very competitive. I want to beat my friends and in the business, but at the same time, I'm rooting for them. And so I think for me, growing up and having a couple of different things I was doing, it was radio, and then it turned into TV when I was 17, doing a lot of Fox News, Bill O'Reilly hits, and then trying to juggle. I think what I learned is you don't have to be a perfectionist, and you can go pro in a couple of different things and figure out which one in the end of the day is the one you're passionate about and love the most. And I was lucky. I got to do both at the same time. I got to play a sport at the highest level that I could do. And I also, got to go pro and doing radio and TV.
You were making $3.75 an hour plus the added bonus of free pizza from Pizza Hut.
You did your research, my friend. Yeah. That was a signing bonus. All right, we'll give you pizza when you come into the office for your lunch, when you're getting ready for the show. And I think it was $3.75, went up to $4.35 at some point, minimum wage. Yeah.
How much pizza did you eat?
Every week that pizza came in from, I think it was Pizza Hut. Yeah, it was Pizza Hut and then Domino's. They had a deal with Domino's. And so I would always eat, whatever I could eat. And then my producer got the other part as well.
The whole thing started for you when you were 12 years old. You're driving in the car with your mom, and you guys were listening to a radio talk show here in Memphis, and you called in, to challenge the host on some of the research that you had done and what he was talking about. And you ended up getting him invited to the studio after a few times of calling. And that's how, the Ben Ferguson era began. That's not what the average 12 to 13-year-old around that time was doing, was it?
No, it wasn't. My mom was listening to talk radio in the car. It was a blue Ford Aerostar van with that upholstery interior. So just paint that picture, okay? And she was listening to News Talk 790, and the show that I called into was before talk radio really became more conservative talk radio stations. It was Janice Foley Love, and then it was Mike Fleming, right? I mean, it was very much, there was a liberal show and a conservative show. And so when I called in and challenged Janice on a topic where I thought she lied to her audience and did my research, and she yelled at me, and I gave her the facts and, read the bill, and she hadn't, I just fell in love with it because I could hide behind the microphone where no one could see you. And I learned very quickly that people would judge you based on what you said, not based on what you looked like. And I'm talking about age. Right. My biggest asset was my age when you're younger, because there's a uniqueness to it. There's a novelty. But then it immediately, after I kind of established myself in radio, became my biggest weakness, because it was the way that people would tear you down and detract from your accomplishment. Well, what the hell does he know? He's only 13 or 14 or 15 or 17 or 20. I mean, I got an email one day from this kid that said, "Hey, I just want to say I've taken your spot as the youngest syndicated talk show in America." And I wrote back in all caps, "Thank the Lord." Like, I was ready to get rid of being the youngest. Right. I think his show lasted 6 weeks. Doesn't matter to me. At least he did it. It was like that monkey was off my back. And look, even recently, I turned 40 this last year. And it was kind of like I'm ready to be 40. Some people, I think, freak out. I've been wanting to be older for quite some time, so that you can just not have to feel like people can undermine you based on your age, or treat you like you're a sport or junior or champ, as I call it, that mentality, especially with elected officials and people that work in politics. There's so much arrogance that come from local elected officials, where they basically think that, you should shut up. You should at the back of the room. You shouldn't have an opinion. And that was my goal, was to say, no, like, I don't have to wait till I'm 18 or 21 to have an opinion. I don't have to wait till I have kids to have an opinion. I don't have to wait till I hit 40 to have an opinion. And I hope I've inspired other people in the same way. But there is certainly that age factor that was a part of my career, that was a blessing, and then very much was used against you for 25 years. Right.
What was it like to be the youngest nationally syndicated talk show host, just being 20 years old?
Yeah, that was a really cool moment for me. When you get syndicated and you're the youngest, and you're syndicated on the same stations where guys like Limbaugh and Hannity and Beck have been doing this, and people like Michael Reagan and G. Gordon Liddy, and you're filling in for you like Oliver North. That's a really good feeling. And to be able to do it, it's one thing to get it, but then there's that you're terrified. Am I going to fail? Right. I've got one of the longest running syndicated radio shows in America. I started, like you said, 1920, and I'm 40. So I've been doing it for 21 years every Sunday night. And that's why we built a successful brand around it. But being able to not just do it, but actually stick with it, and to have it for that long. I've got one of the longest, if not, I think the longest talk show in Memphis that's on the radio. Yeah, I mean, now I think about it, I'm for sure it is. And that's something that's a cool accomplishment, to say that you were able to, you got to reinvent yourself, and you can't just be the same thing forever. And I think learning how to reinvent yourself and change with the medium changing, and the ADD world that we live in now, and you're up against the podcasts now, and and I'm doing both. It's weird. I'm doing radio and podcasts and TV. And so trying to figure out how to stay with the audience. And look, I've had audience members that started listening when they were 40 and now they're 60. You think about it. I've got, technically, if I started when I was 12 and now I'm 40, I mean, do the math on that. You're talking, you know, a 30-year plus career where people that started listening when they were 30 are now 60, where they're 40, they're now 70. And so to be able to have that and bring in that younger generation or that next generation News Talk listener, I think it's probably been one of the most, I guess, the high points of my career.
You know, you went to Ole Miss and you graduated in 2004. And, you know, then in September of 2004, you were on stage at the GOP Youth Convention in Madison Square Garden with in New York with Jenna and Barbara Bush, you know, the daughters of, you know, then President George W. Bush and Laura Bush. What were Jenna and Barbara like?
They were really cool. I got asked to be a surrogate on the Bush campaign in 2004 and got to travel with the Bush twins because they wanted to be involved in their dad's last campaign. That was the last time he was ever going to run for office. And they were coming of age right there at the end of college. They were same age as me, where I think they realized, okay, we want to help our dad get reelected. And it was important to them. They were old enough to, I think, appreciate that moment instead of when he's running for governor or their grandfather's the president. And it's more of an annoyance or it takes away from you. And you've got the Secret Service around you and you feel like you're in this bubble. And they were at that point where they think they really wanted to have a spot in that campaign and an influence. And so I got to travel with them, get to know them. Barbara was awesome. Jenna was hysterical. And to be able to see, I saw Jenna not that long ago at an NBC Today Show-esque event. You know, it's just pretty cool. And Barbara was at St. Jude not that long ago, several years ago. And, you know, you get to see how we all kind of ended up in this industry in a different way. You know, Barbara and Jenna do these books together, which is pretty cool. And to get to serve the president at the time and to see George W. Bush. And so, you know, one of my favorite nights was during the 2004 convention. We all jumped in the motorcade and got to go through Times Square. Not many people can say they were in a motorcade going through Times Square. We went to a party after convention night. And it was Barbara and Jen and I and a couple others in this, you know, literally caravan, Secret Service, and all these police going straight through Times Square. And I'm like, that's on the bucket list now. Like, I'll remember that the rest of my life.
What is your morning routine like?
You know, my show starts at 7 and you're going to laugh. I'll tell you the truth. I wake up at 6:40. I do my show prep usually the night before when I go to bed, and I sleep in. My alarm goes off at 6:40. I wake up, I have the coffee preset. My kids usually wake up before me and they know, turn the coffee pot on. And so they hit the button. I'll go out and get coffee, talk to the kids. And then I have a studio in my house. And so I go up to my studio where I'm doing this interview right now with you and get after it. And, you know, I know what I'm going to start with. Usually there's certain X factors that happen every day where you're kind of like, oh, wow, that's new. But when I'm in that studio for those 3 hours, I am constantly studying and reading the entire time. I basically don't leave the room and I'm pulling audio and different things. I have a producer that's been with me now for, over a decade. You'll hear me yell at him on the radio, Diaz. Right. And so if there's things that break, he gets there a little early and sends them to me and a Facebook rundown. We communicate through Facebook. And so I know where we are when we walk in that morning. And that's how my morning routine works.
You know, if meeting the daughters of the president of the United States isn't exciting enough, you know, on June 23rd, 2005, at just 23 years old, you're invited to a town hall meeting in Maryland to be on stage with Ben Stein and President George W. Bush. You get to have a back and forth conversation with the most powerful man in the world. I mean, it's just unreal. Tell us a little bit about that day.
Yeah, you know, I got a phone call from Karl Rove, and I was working on Social Security reform after we won that election in 2004. And so I was at the White House. It was just a pinch me moment almost every day for a couple of years straight. And so I got a phone call from, I think it was Karl, and he said, hey, I need you to come over and meet with me real quick. And so I went over to the West Wing, and most people in politics lie. They'll tell you they work at the White House. People that work at the White House, some of them will never even go into the White House while they work at the White House. Right. You work at the EOB or you work on 17th and Penn on the office buildings down the street. Very few people work in the White House. And so I went from the EOB across the little walkway over to the West Wing, and I walked inside and Ben Stein was there. Ben Stein, I'd done TV before for a long time on Fox News Channel with Neil Cavuto. And so I knew him really well. And he looked at me and he goes, what the hell are you doing here? I said, I got a meeting. What the hell are you doing here? And he goes, I got a meeting. And I said, dude, nice shoes. Well, if you know Ben Stein, he likes to wear sneakers, right?
Right.
So even then he wore sneakers into the Oval Office. And so we got asked to go in this meeting. They said, look, the president has been doing these town halls on Social Security reform. They've been kind of landing a little flat, and they needed some excitement on stage. They need to kind of up the ante a little bit. And so Carl had the idea to put Ben Stein and myself on stage with the president and see if we could kind of up the level of intensity and get some headlines out of this and kind of, you know, put a shot of adrenaline into this initiative. And it worked. And we got to do that town hall and several other events after that until we did it all the way up until August 28th, 29th, when Hurricane Katrina hit. My birthday is August 28th, so I always remember that night of the 28th. I was at the White House when we were watching basically the flooding and those levees break and seeing those people that were stranded inside that Superdome. And we knew then Social Security reform was dead. It was a third rail issue. It was hard. We worked hard on it. And it was fun. And it was devastating, I think, for President Bush at the time, because it was something he really wanted to do. He wanted it to be a part of his legacy. Right. And it was something that was important to him. And to be able to see the politics that were taking place with people's lives was, I think, one of the lowest points of my career in politics. You know, I was in the White House when I was witnessing the president beg for the governor and the mayor to declare a state of emergency days in advance of Hurricane Katrina hitting, and so that he could bring in the National Guard and get people out. And they refused to do it solely because of politics. I was there when they were making the phone calls, begging them to not put people in that Superdome because they said it was going to be a death trap, and begging them to use those buses that became so famous on TV. Right. You know, to witness the sausage being made, as they say in politics, was one of the most disheartening things, where people just couldn't make logical decisions and take politics out of it and just look at something as, hey, we can be on the same team here, right? I don't need to be, you know, giving the middle finger to the president because he's a Republican. I need to be working with the president to get people out, and to see what was happening with the governor there and the people and lives at risk, all just over politics. Was one of the hardest things I think I've ever seen in real time play out, because you knew the decisions that were being made, people were going to die. You know, and I also saw the other side of things too. Like you remember the famous picture of George Bush looking out the window of Air Force One, flying over New Orleans, and people just hammering him, the media. And that was hard because I knew the story behind it. We'd gone down to Mississippi with Haley Barbour, and we knew that it was not the right time for the president to land because it was going to take resources away from search and rescue. And it was very clear with Department of Homeland Security. It was very clear with FEMA that it was a bad decision for the president to land. That's why we went to Mississippi. There was a long conversation about that with Haley Barbour. And we knew that it was the right thing to do to go to Mississippi, and it would be the wrong thing to do with all the search and rescue and flooding and the levees breaking to go to New Orleans. And to see people play politics with that was also really just sad. I remember watching that unfold, and I'm like, you people have no idea what's actually happening behind the scenes. And I learned from that moment, I think, because you learn sometimes when there are issues that affect everyone's life, you've got to hit pause. And I'll give you an example where that recently played in. You know, I called the county mayor, Lee Harris. I said, hey, when we had the initial unknown of COVID and the city was going to shut down and businesses were going to shut down and restaurants were shutting down and schools were closing, I called Harris and I said, hey, I want you to come on. I want you to come on often, because we are in this territory now where people want to hear from their leaders. Even if it's no news, they still want to hear your voice. Right. And we don't agree on politics, but this was an issue that didn't matter, right? It was non-political, especially early on. Right. And you know, I learned, I think, from what happened with Katrina to make sure you make those phone calls, you know, and then there was points where you just want to beat your head against the wall. I tried to reach out multiple times, the city mayor, and he doesn't like me for my political stances, and he wouldn't come on. And I'm like, you're declaring a state of emergency in Memphis. Like, people are freaking out. They need to hear from the mayor. Right. And I even sent an email to them. I said, I promise you, I'll ask you nothing political. I will ask you nothing about crime. This is not the time for that issue. Just come on and let people hear from you. And he refused to do it. And I think that's, you know, one of the things I learned is there's certain moments in your career, if you do what I do, where you need to have a ceasefire and you need to have a pause. And there's certain moments where your job is just to get good information out. And having on, the governor on a daily basis, and congressmen and the senators, and having on directors of FEMA, and having on even the sheriff, and just letting people know what was happening during this time where no one knew what was happening with COVID early on. Right. And having on the county mayor, and having on city council members or Democrats, and having on county commissioners, it was a really important moment where you're serving your community.
A lot of people might not remember Ben Stein before he got really involved in politics. He was an actor, and he was in that famous scene in 1986, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he's the teacher.
Oh, yeah.
With, I believe it was Christy Swanson in that scene. And, where Bueller, it's just, very memorable. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
So you'll love this. It was another one of those moments in my career. We got done doing that event with the president, and we ended up going to the Watergate compound where he had a apartment / townhome, whatever you want to call it, and having a drink with Ben Stein on that balcony, talking about Ferris Bueller on the day that we got to hang out with the president on stage. I was like, all right, I'm good. Like, you can take me out if you need to. This is bucket list, and no one can take this away from me.
What is the best compliment that you've ever gotten?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, probably that. I think for me, it's when people say, I don't agree with you all the time, but I appreciate the conversation that you provide for people, the outlet you provide for people, and the accountability that you have. I took a lot of heat because I was attacking the GOP Republican Party over just a total bloodbath of an election in Memphis last week. And I knew, and I said weeks in advance, it was going to be a beatdown. And I talked about how I was sick and tired of the money of Memphis controlling the candidates, and how they picked terrible candidates and got hammered in this election. And if people listen to me long enough, I think they realize I have sincere love for the city that I grew up in. I want it to be a safe city. I want it to be a great city. And I'm not afraid to attack my own party when we screw up. And if that means that I lose friends in politics, I don't care. One of the perks of being starting so young is I don't try to be friends with politicians. I don't try to hang out with them. I try to avoid them because it all, someday you're going to have to criticize them. Right. And if you're too close to them, you can't criticize them. We saw that with, the Watergate papers, right? If you go back and watch that movie that came out a couple of years ago, Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, and if you get too close to whether it's a president or somebody else, at some point you lose focus on your job. And so I criticize both sides of the aisle when they screw up. And if that means Republicans, I don't care anymore. And I really don't. I wake up every day and I say half America hates me. And that's means half America likes me. So I figure I'm doing all right.
Back in 2004, you met someone in a chance meeting at the NBC studios in Washington. You guys met in the green room while you were getting ready to be interviewed on television. Of course, I'm sure I'm talking about NBC's Tim Russert.
Yeah, Tim Russert.
For those that don't remember, Tim, he was a longtime host of NBC's Meet the Press for, I believe, over 16 years. And he passed away suddenly back in June of 2008. And you had a really special friendship with him. Tim, I remember, he pretty much got along with everybody. He was liked by almost everybody, even though some of them maybe feared him, but they still respected him. He was blunt, and he said, you said he was, quote, he was a big kid and he understood what really mattered in life.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship.
He was a family man, and he just took to me because I think he saw some similarities, right? He wanted to make it. He worked hard. And he wanted to encourage me, and he always did. And we saw each other a lot in the green room. Where his office was in DC, I was in there a lot doing MSNBC. And so I would just poke my head in the door and say, hey, buddy, how are you? And he would always jump up, and we would chat and talk, and he'd pick my brain about what was going on maybe with the Bush campaign or the Bush administration or whatever. He was always digging for info, which is he was an authentic reporter in that way, a journalist. And he was one of the last guys, I think, that wasn't just a political hack. He was a guy that was trying to get good information and would hold people accountable when they gave him bad information or they made crap up. We don't seem to have that anymore in mainstream media on ABC, NBC, CBS. George Stephanopoulos, for example, worked for Clinton. I don't expect him to be nonpartisan, but let's not act like he's not, right, a partisan individual. Right. And Tim was one of those last, I think, breed of individuals that understood his job, did it really well. But he was also, I think, someone that rooted for other people. And look, in this business, especially in politics and in radio and TV, there's not a lot of people that will go their way to help you. It's a dog eat dog world. It's pretty nasty. I don't have a lot of friends in the business, unfortunately, because people just go their corner with their team and they don't try to help people succeed. And Tim was always trying to help people, I think, around him succeed, which is something that we've really lost in this industry.
He also gave you some really good special advice. He said, quote, if you want to make a difference in your world, and I really think you do, when you go on TV, you have to be memorable. Anyone can be decent, but when you leave, you want people talking about what you said for days, unquote. Yeah. What did it mean to you for him to take the time out and share that with you? And how do you think that affected your career?
Oh, it was a huge impact because he saw me do and I can't remember which show it was, but he'd watched and he said, hey, he said, you were memorable yesterday. And he'd watched the show and he was like, remember that. You got to be memorable. There's a lot of talking heads that come and go, but you want to be memorable. And you got to make people remember your personality. And that means, find what it is that you're going to be and stick with it. Be authentic to who you are and be true to who you are. I'm a blunt guy. I'm loud. Right. I don't want to be considered obnoxious. Right. I'm not a stand-up comedian in that way. Okay. But I'm not a timid guy on TV. Let's go. When that light comes on, let's go. I did it earlier today. Right. People say, oh, you bullied her. And others say you killed her. They're referring to the person I went up against. That's just my style. And you're either you like it or you don't, but that's who I am. It feels very authentic. And so that's part of what he was saying is find your niche, find your thing and stick with it and don't stop. And I think that's what made him so good is you knew what you got with him every week. Right. He wasn't a chameleon. You knew who he was. And you knew he was going to be next week, next month, and next year.
I know you talked about this a little bit earlier, but how do you balance life and work?
I like to hide. My wife, I think the hardest part when we were in Memphis was going out and not being able to just sit at a table without being kind of bothered. Right. And I say bothered, let me rephrase that. I love it when people walk up and say hello. And I love it when people walk up and say that they listen to the show. And I love interacting with people that have given me this incredible ability to do what I do for a living, right? And make a living. Without the people, I don't exist. Right. Without the listeners, I don't exist. But there was a certain part of from her, I think it was a fatigue where, you go out and people are constantly, they're getting in your face and yelling at you or, hey, I don't want to interrupt your dinner, but, right. And so I joke now because we have a very small circle and we kind of hide. And that's, there's some people that love that attention, that fame. And I enjoy going to political conventions and having a taste of that and walking around and people saying, can I get a picture and that and this? But at the end of the day, I just want to spend time with my family. I want to be able to provide for my family. I do enough of the stuff on radio and TV and the podcast. And look, I was on a plane yesterday coming back from New York from doing an appearance on Fox. And, guy walks past the seat and he's like, you're an effing asshole. Hey, you know what? I was memorable, right? Like, right. And that's okay. You can have that opinion. I'm not going to engage you. I think, I'm not going to, it doesn't bother me, but I always say, just get my name right. Right. And my favorite is like people that are, I'll never listen to you again. Promise, that's usually how I respond. The guy's like, you're the worst radio show in the world. Well, grab that knob right there and give it a whirl, give it a spin. You never have to, no one's forced you to listen to me. And so you kind of get some of that where you just learn, hey, some people are going to like you, some aren't, and it's okay. But at the end of the day, I think, I had a mentor of mine, John Ashcroft, who told me this, and it stuck with me when I was younger. He said, I don't care how much money you have in your bank account. I don't care what your resume says. If you screw up your kids, in my opinion, you will always be looked at as a failure. And it stuck with me since that moment he said it when he was mentoring me. And several other people. We were at his farm in Virginia when he was the attorney general. And I just remember that. He's like, look, he's like, I know billionaires that kids won't even talk to them. They won't even take their phone calls.
Right.
You know, like I know people that have had amazing careers, but their kids are drug addicts and have OD'd on drugs. You know, they weren't around. So don't screw your kids up, because if you do, that's the real definition of success and failure. And that stuck with me because I try to really focus on quality time with kids.
You know, obviously, you talk about family is so important to you. Tell us a little bit about your parents, Bruce and Karen, and your sister, Holly.
Yeah, they're, you know, born and raised Memphis. My sister's a school teacher. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was in law enforcement. And now he still works at the sheriff's department with ES, emergency services. And they're just, you know, they love Memphis. And my sister works in inner city school. She loves the kids, loves Memphis, wants it to just become a better place. You get to see how crime affects kids' lives and you know, high crime, high poverty areas. And I think, you know, if I look at my parents and I see a dedication, a commitment to a city and a town they love, and they want it to be a better place. And that's probably something they instilled in me. Everybody does it in a different way. My dad was through law enforcement, my mom and my sister through teaching, mine's through talking about what's happening on the city council and the county commission, the mayor, and trying to hold them accountable for, you know, the stupid things that they do. And try to shed a light on the dumb things that are happening, so people realize, like, hey, we can do better than this. And it's cool that we all kind of have that same theme in our lives, just in a different way.
How is your mom doing?
She's good. She fought hard with cancer, had a very tough stage 4 uphill battle, got thyroid cancer, but we got her in at Vanderbilt and the West Clinic, and she is kicking. And yeah, I mean, she's, you know, it's a miracle she's still with us. I think her doctors would say that. I don't think they thought she would be here in 2022, but she is. And, you know, she's making memories with her grandkids, which is just fun to see. I think it's interesting in life when you see things change, where you're watching your parents getting a little bit older. COVID almost took my dad's life last November, before that first November of COVID. So I guess now 2 years ago. And he was in the hospital for quite some time and was on oxygen for 3-4 months afterwards. And it definitely aged him. He had double pneumonia and came out of it. But it's when you watch your parents transition and then you get to see them interact with your kids, their grandkids, and see that full circle happen, it'll take your breath away some days, especially when you've almost lost both your parents. And my mom, I mean, we almost lost her in the hospital a couple of times. Right. And the same with my dad with COVID. And so when you see that, I think it makes those times a lot more precious.
You know, you've appeared, or you've been a commentator on MSNBC, the Fox News Channel, CNBC, Fox Business, CNN Headline News, and I'm sure there's more. And, you know, now obviously you have a national syndicated, you know, weekend show for 23 years on iHeartRadio. You've accomplished some just remarkable things so far, and you're only about to be 41 years old in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I know your goals are larger than that, because I remember we chatted about things, you know, before when you were out at my store doing the remotes.
Yeah.
So you have goals that are bigger than what you've done so far. But have you ever had that I've made it moment?
Yeah, I think so. As I told you earlier, I'm very competitive. I want to, if I'm going to do it, I'm all in. I want to do it well. And, you know, I have certain goals in my head that I've not reached. But there are certain moments where, you know, I said to somebody, asked, they're like, when did you know you had a voice? I'm like, well, when the president of the United States of America is tweeting at you and he's pissed. That's a good moment.
Right.
You know, when Donald Trump was a candidate and he's just hammering me because of what I said about him on TV. When I was, you know, not supporting him, I was supporting Ted Cruz at the time. That's a moment you're like, all right, I got to see at the table. You know what I mean? When you see George Bush 43 and he has a nickname for you, like still this day when he sees me, he calls me Mississippi, because I went to Ole Miss, and you know, get to, you know, have those kind of moments. When you see when Hillary Clinton, when you're at the DNC convention, she sees you and just kind of gives you that F you look. That's a good moment. You know, it went same thing with Barack Obama when he walks up and he said to me one time, Capitol, hello, Ben. They know what you're doing. They know what you're saying about them on TV. And I think that's certainly a make it moment. But I also think I don't take that long to dwell on it. And I keep thinking about moving forward. You know, my goals change, and I have short-term goals and mid to long-term. You know, I would love to have at some point either the biggest podcast in politics in America. Right now, Ben Shapiro's got that title. Would I love to have that title? Yeah. Do I think I can do it? Yes. Do I think it's going to be really hard? Yes. Ben's got an amazing show. He's a good friend of mine, and I'm rooting for him. He got an early start in podcasting years ago, whenever I thought it was not going to be anything. And so can you overcome that? I don't know. Would I love to be the next Mark Levin one day, right? Or Glenn Beck or Hannity or even, you know, I don't think anybody will be Limbaugh, obviously, but to have that level, of course. If I never get that chance, I've been on that short list a lot. Will I be upset? I don't think so. And I think probably the reason why is because as long as I can provide for my family and spend time with them, and watch them grow up. You know, my biggest accomplishment was getting to watch my son play at Pinehurst in the World Championships. Would I trade that to have a Monday through Friday show where I couldn't have been there? No, like I would take that week off. And if I couldn't, we'd have to look at what plan B is. So for me, you know, there's little things now that I've done in my career. Having a barbecue restaurant is a great example. It brings me such joy to cook food, to know that that's my menu, that's my recipes. It's a break from politics. No one hates you when you make good barbecue. Is right. You know, feeding people brings people together around a table. And that's an outlet for me to do something totally different. And so I've learned that, you know, hey, I've had a good career. My goal now is I want to retire by the time I'm 50 and keep doing exactly what I'm doing. That, you know, but be able to walk away at any moment, at any point, if I want to.
If you could have a beer with any historical figure, who would you choose?
Ronald Reagan. Yeah, I think so. You know, I never got to meet Ronald Reagan. And I just think he was an incredible president that understood personal diplomacy, not mocking or taking a victory lap after Gorbachev and Russia fell, understanding that you can put, knowing the situation he was in Russia, not coming back and grandstanding in the Berlin Wall, coming down, witnessing that type of personal diplomacy where, hey, we defeated communism. That's good enough. I don't need to run up the score here to make myself look even better. I think we've lost that in politics. Michael Reagan, his son, and I are good friends, and we've gotten to have dinner quite a few times. And I got to fill in on his radio show. And I've heard a lot of stories through him or through Ed Meese, who was his AG at the time when I worked with him at the Heritage Foundation. And I feel like I know a lot about him through the people that knew him the best. But if I could go back in time and just sit down with somebody, that would be a dream come true.
You know, if you didn't have enough going on to keep you busy, you know, a few years ago, you opened up, you know, the Top Gun indoor gun range. And just like you just talked about in Ferguson's BBQ, you took over the old Range USA building at 2770 Whitten Road, you know, right around the corner from my old store, Sleepy's Eve, where we met 6 years ago. Yeah. What made you decide to go into the barbecue restaurant business? And please tell us a little bit about that barbecue, because I haven't had it yet. You've told me how great it is. I know I got to go there.
That's on you. I know you know how to drive. That's on you.
Yeah.
It happened. It was funny. So we were living in Memphis, and in Memphis, you don't really cook barbecue. You just go get it from the best places in the world that are down the street, right? I mean, you don't. And so I'd never, ever cooked barbecue until my TV job and radio moved me to Dallas. And so when we moved to Dallas, I went to go get barbecue, and it sucked. I mean, Michael, when I tell you it sucked, it sucked. It was almost unedible. And they had this thing called brisket, and it was good, but it wasn't Southern barbecue. A brisket to me is totally separate. It's a totally separate thing. It's its own unique entity. It's amazing. I love brisket. I do briskets on the menu. And I'm proud of it, but it's not pulled pork. It's not smoked sausage. It's not pork ribs. And so I was frustrated because I started trying to find other places. I couldn't find any barbecue. So I came back to Memphis and asked some guys to teach me how to do barbecue. And then I just got kind of obsessed with it, where I was, you know, every weekend smoking around. This is pre-kids.
Right.
And, I'd grab a slab of ribs just to smoke them, just to get better at it, and a chicken, and then sausage and stuff. And so I started getting into it. And then I had another neighbor who was like, he had a competition team. And he was like, dude, let's get in some competitions together. And we did, and we started doing them pretty good. And so then this idea was like, man, I'd love to do something outside of politics where it was just so divisive. I was at CNN at the time as a conservative commentator. And if I went on TV, it was 100 death threats, right? And then there was a lawsuit with a kid that he made a clock to look like a bomb. They called him Clock Boy. He wore the NASA shirt. His father ended up suing me. We had to move out of our house because there's so many death threats. It was ugly. And there was a point there, I'm like, screw all this. Like, this isn't worth it. And to have to walk, there was a point when the police said, we can't keep you safe. You need to get out of your house. And that's not a good feeling when the police tell you that, that there's so many credible threats coming in against you that you can't, they can't keep you safe. Right. And so for me, that was kind of my outlet. And so when Range USA closed, I'm a victim of a gun crime in Memphis and firmly believe in a person's right to protect and defend themselves and their family. But I wanted to have a place where people could go and learn, and they could protect and defend themselves the same way I was able to. And so when they closed, I called a buddy who's in the gun business and I said, dude, let's go get this thing. He's like, I don't know, I'm getting close to retirement. I'm like, dude, I can't do it without you. I don't know the gun side of things, but I know the marketing side of things. And I was like, hell, let's put a barbecue restaurant in there. And he grinned. He's like, all right, that actually may work. And so we opened it now 3 years ago, turned it into a multi-million-dollar business, and it's become kind of a staple. So if you go in there, you can get some of the, I think it's the best brisket you can find in the Mid-South. It's got really good barbecue. I don't ever say I'm the best because I think there's so many people that do it so well in Memphis, but I feel like it can compete with any other place you like.
You and your wife Anna have been married, I think now over 12 years. And you talked about you have 3 kids together, and you have a son, Bradley, who talked about just played in the U.S. Kids Junior World Golf Championships at 6 years old. That's unbelievable.
It was pretty fun.
Twin boys. Tell us a little bit about how you and Anna met, and just a little bit about your family that you're able to share.
Yeah, no, we met at Ole Miss. She went to Ole Miss. We never dated in college. There's actually pictures of us at formals where she was with her date and I was with my date. And we were just friends. We did some study abroad the summer of my senior year, after my senior year. And we became really good friends because we went over to Spain, and you got 6 hours of credit at the 200 level in about, I think it was 6 weeks. And so it was intense. You live with a family that doesn't speak English, and we just kind of buddied up because a lot of the kids that are over there were just getting hammered and trying drugs and just going crazy in Europe, and we kind of had the same value system. And so we had good friends and we knew each other, right, in college, but we really got to know each other then. And nothing happened. It was, we got to really know each other. When we're hanging out with somebody day and night for that many days in a row, right. and came back to back to America, I immediately went on book tour, and then I went to the Bush campaign and did that. And so, we ended up not even dating for, I think, another year and a half after that, 2 years almost. And so we dated long distance, and she worked for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and then moved to Memphis for a job on the patient team there, which was pretty cool. So we were in the same city and dated for about a year and then got engaged.
How you said your the twins are 3?
Twins are 3 now. Yeah. They hit 3 in February.
Tell us a little bit about them.
Hilarious. They're best friends and arch rivals at the same time. Like they love being around each other, but they can throw down each other, which is exactly what you usually get with twins. Every twin parent does the same thing. John is he has my grandfather's name, and he is obsessed with golf, just like his older brother. That's all he wants to do. I come home, and the first thing is, Daddy, can we go play golf? We try to spell the word golf, and now he's figured out that word. Right. So he says now, he goes, Daddy, can we go play GERF? It's not GOLF, it's GR, but he knows what it means. And so he's 3 years old. He hits his drive 70 yards now, just crushes the ball. Georgie, my other twin, one of the twins, could care less. He looks like Tarzan. He's got 2 hands on the stick and just, smacking the ground. He's more the kid that just wants to have fun and hang out, go swimming, and just, he loves his mama. He's definitely mama's boy. in a good way and that capacity. So just watching their unique personalities are all very different, which I love. They're all, George loves trains. We went to Colorado this summer for a week just because it's still magical, to Durango. We did that Durango steam train ride, and they just loved it. And so to see that, different things that give them passion, that light them up, I think it's pretty fun.
What are the most important lessons that you've learned in your life so far?
Loyalty, I think, is number one to me. I'm a person that is, if I'm your friend, I'm with you through thick and thin, whether that's driving you to check yourself into rehab, to getting you out of rehab, or telling you need to go to rehab. I say that because it just happened with a dear friend of mine. And I told him, I was like, dude, I'm here to watch you win. This is not you failing. This is you learning to succeed again. And I'm a loyal person. I think there's so many people that I've had to deal with that are just scumbags in the industry that I'm in, that are only out for themselves. I have a very, very small friend group. Unfortunately, I think nowadays I have to play defense a lot more of who I let in that friend group, because there's people that'll, they want to make a name for themselves. They want to rip on you or put something on social media, or, and so I wouldn't say paranoid. I just think you just have to be smart and kind of protect your inner circle. But loyalty for me is number one. And if you're my friend, you are my friend. Through thick or thin, better or worse, rich or poor, you're my friend. And I think that's what I hope for my boys I can teach them is, you hold on to family and friends that are close to you. I think there's nothing that hurts worse than having someone that doesn't stand by your side when you're at your low point. Right. And look, everybody has a low point in their life. You and I have talked about this. You've had low points. It's the people that stick with you through those downtimes. I also think I learned a long time ago that you can't find your value in your last accomplishment. And people that I watch who find their value based on when they were on TV last, or how good they are, their podcast is in the charts, or how was their last book a bestseller, or did they speak at the biggest convention? That's exhausting. Have I been there before? Yeah. I mean, I've been there, right? But I've learned you got to be an authentic human being first and foremost, and just be true to who you are. And look, if you have a long career, there are going to be times when you're not at the top, and there's going to be times when you go back down. There are going to be times where you've been asked to speak at a certain event year after year, and all of a sudden they don't call. And that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means there's cycles, right? There's new shiny objects, and it's a marathon. This career, what I do for a living, is 100% a marathon. I can give you 500 names that have come and gone, flashes in the pan, and political stars that blew up like a firework. But once that firework blows up, it's over. And you got to have some authentic meat and potatoes and a base and a foundation. Otherwise, this industry will eat you alive.
As I mentioned earlier, you and I met, 6 years ago at my store when you would come out and do your radio show there every few months or so. And, you've always been really cool to me and really nice. And I appreciate that. Some of my most fun memories of that is not the show. It's you got there an hour before, around 3 o'clock, and you and I and Sarah would sit back in my office and just talk and laugh and have fun. So, I really have the utmost respect for what you do. I know you take a lot of hits, but you obviously have that inner fire in you that, no matter what, you just got to keep going. Yeah, you just do. And, I think in any career nowadays, there's always going to be people that are detractors. There's always going to be people that want to undermine you. And if you're doing something right, there's probably someone that's trying to stop you. And I try to tell people that all the time. Like, I don't read the press. I don't read my Twitter feed anymore. It's just a waste of time. I go do what I do. I say what I'm going to say, and I sleep well at night, unless I have a cold. And that's, if that's the only thing that's keeping me up, I'm all right. Man, I really appreciate you coming on today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and come on again sometime in the future. I'd love to have you back. Anytime. It was fun talking, not politics. So thanks for having me, and congrats on your podcast. And I'm excited to see where this goes for you as well. Thanks so much, Ben. Take care. See ya.